Hello, my name is Valeria Frunze and I'm running an estate agency specialized in property investment, property development and portfolio management. I will quote an expression that an old friend of mine, Douglas, was always saying, and he was constantly telling me that rent keeps you poor. And I completely agree with this expression, and I really liked the fact that he was always mentioning it because several years ago I was a tenant myself and I was renting an apartment in Notting Hill, and the rent was, let's say, a third of my salary and sometimes half of my salary, so it was a big liability for me. And Douglas was trying to push me to switch from being a tenant into being a investor or a house owner or multiple house owners. So he helped me to click this in my head and understand that me being a tenant is actually creating a liability and making myself poorer. So I want to share my experience with everyone and maybe help inspiring them to change their mindset and understand that buying your own property or getting a mortgage is a good thing if you're a professional in your late 20s and early 40s, early 50s even. So I want to explain a little bit about it and maybe give you a little bit of incentives and insights on how to do it. So I will share my own story for you to understand how I do it, and maybe you can just copy it. So for the last 10 years, I used to work as 3 jobs a day, but that's not a necessary thing for people to do. It's just, for me, it was 3 jobs a day because it was giving me flexibilities, and I keep getting bored easily, so I needed the different experiences. So I will do 3 jobs a day in order to work on my cash flow and credit score. So if you are interested or looking into getting a mortgage in the next 6 months or 1 year, cash flow and credit score is two things that are the most important things in getting a mortgage. And thankfully, I had friends that they were good at financial services, so they gave me some insights and stuff, and then I made a plan in how to apply for a mortgage and buy my own property. So for 2 years I worked hard and built a good relationship with my bank. I received all my salary on the bank account, and obviously I paid my tax as a good citizen always. And as a result, that worked well on the cash flow, because cash flow is the circulation of the money on into your bank account, so that money comes and go and it creates this cycle. And the credit score is the second part, and it's mainly the most important part, because credit score shows how serious and responsible are you on paying your loans. So normally you build credit score if you buy a mobile phone and pay it in installments on a credit card. If you get a credit card, or if you buy a car as well. So if you have like a small loan and then you're responsible on paying on time and paying the full amount, that will create a very good credit score for you, and it will assemble the whole package in order for you to be do well with the next step, which is the mortgage, and it's of course a bigger amount. So really and truly, cash flow and credit score are two of the most important things in order for you to build for the next, let's say, 6 months, 1 year. And this is first thing that the bank will look at. And then the second, obviously, finding the property and then valuating it, and so on and so on. But that's a discussion for a different matter. I just want to do a little bit of an insight about mortgages and rent, because this is the theme of the podcast. So why should you go for a mortgage instead of renting? Well, I'll elaborate some points. So for you to know, if you're a tenant right now, you should know that 70% of the properties in that particular country or cities are owned by people that are on a mortgage plan. So what that means, that there is a high possibility that you will be a tenant of a person who owns a mortgage against that property. And what that means, it means that you and your rent goes against that mortgage. So you're paying your landlord's mortgage. Meanwhile, you're getting poor because that particular money could be focused on paying your own mortgage and owning your own property. So this is the actual routine and the reality of things. Now, I spoke with many of my friends and I keep pushing them, as Douglas pushed me 5 years ago, to go into mortgage and break the stereotype of like owning money to the bank and getting involved into mortgages and things like that. So really and truly, the main problem why people don't go and get a mortgage are two and sometimes free. One is the fear of commitment. So they are scared to commit for 10 or 20 or 30 years installment payments on a monthly basis towards that mortgage. So they're scared to commit of a every month payment for the next 20 years, which, yes, it is a big, it's a long time, but also it builds something for you. So it's your own home, it's your own property, it's an asset, it's an investment. So it's something good. You should not be scared about that. And also, if you don't know what happens in 10 years, you can, or you want to change your career, or you want to change, move into a different country, you can always rent that particular apartment to somebody else who will pay your mortgage, let's say. So that the rent can go against the mortgage and you'll be sorted. Now, option number two that the people are very scared of is, or not scared, but it's like mainly concerned, is the greed, I call it. So they don't like the fact that when they get a mortgage, they will have to pay almost double back in the next 20 years. Because, for example, if you rent 100,000, if you take a loan of 100,000, in 20 years it will relate to 200,000, and the greed and the discontent of that particular amount is quite of a challenge for a middle class citizen to accept it, because it's their hard work. But it's hard work as well if you pay rent and it goes into somebody else's pocket. So you shouldn't see it this way, but it doesn't matter. So what I argue in this particular case, when people tell me that, hey, but I have to pay double, well, as my friends say, well, tough life, yes, and nothing comes for free in this world, and you have to work for it. And of course, nobody will give you money for free, or money doesn't fall from the sky. You have to pay an interest to that bank. This is the main reason why they will lend you some cash to make a profit out of it. But that particular deal, it's more convenient to you, because first of all, 100,000 today will not have the same value as 100,000 20 years from now, because the currency devalues, loses value, but the property always grows in value. So obviously this particular property, there is a high possibility that in 20 years will be valued as 200,000. And of course, you don't have the stress of collecting that particular amount in 1 year. You are paying on a monthly basis a comfortable plan for you, considering the bank will consider whatever you earn on a monthly basis, so that you don't struggle. But it will be the same amount as your rental payment right now, or maybe 100 or 2 more expensive, but it will not be much different. What I'm trying to say is that that particular 100,000, in many cases you cannot save it, or it will take you 10 years to collect it and save it in order to buy the property and have no debts against it. But If you take it with a bank, you create an installment payments and you don't need to wait for 10 years to save that money, because if you start saving now and in 10 years you'll have 100,000, that particular property will not cost 100,000 anymore. It will be most probably more expensive, and that will create a poverty loop into your system, and you might never end up buying a property. So that's on average lines with the greedy part. Now, the third part, which is also important, is the age gap. The bank is more interested in lending to people within an age gap. So it's mainly late 20s and early 50s, actually late 40s. And even 40s is like a little bit of a push. But really and truly, late 20s and mid 40s is the juicy age gap, where the bank is very interested in giving a mortgage, because you have to get a mortgage on a 20 years plan. So if you're already late 40s, then you will have to pay your mortgage for another 20 years, and obviously you will be 60 or 70. And 60 or 70 don't have the same work capacity as 25 years old individuals. So obviously that is a part of their bank risk assessment, and obviously it's more convenient for them to give you a mortgage when you're younger. So don't waste time on processing or thinking too much, because that might somehow create a disadvantage for you in the future. And don't forget, time is our new religion. So good luck.